Okay, everybody, time to begin. Blessed be the name of the Lord our God, who's brought us together for another Sabbath day to worship Him. And today is the 23rd day of the month of April, 2011, and today is the 19th day of the month of Nisan, or Abib, and the 5th day of the Feast of Passover, and the 4th day of the Omer count. All these things go together, starting out with a lot of unity, all things coming together to fulfill God's purpose. And most of these things, most of the people of God today, I'm afraid, are very ignorant of, especially the Omer count. I mean, even those who keep the Passover, and even those who keep all 7 days of Passover, generally don't understand the Omer count, and they certainly don't do it. So we're going to talk about that among other things today, especially how to count the Omer and when the count should begin. Because even those who claim to keep the holy days of God and claim to keep the Passover and the days of unleavened bread, and then then keep Pentecost, but they determine the date of Pentecost by counting the days from the weekly Sunday that follows the weekly Sabbath day that is during the days of unleavened bread, more or less. And by doing that, they disconnect Pentecost from direct association with the Passover, because the Passover can occur on any day of the week according to God's original calendar. It can occur on a Sunday night Seder, or Monday night as it was this year, or Tuesday night, or Wednesday night, or Thursday night, or Friday night, or Saturday night. The Passover Seder can occur any night of the week according to God's original calendar. And according to the teaching of the Jews, especially the Orthodox Jews and those who follow the original teaching of the Bible and the Tanakh and the history of the Jews, they begin the count of the Omer the day following the Passover High Holy Day. In other words, the Passover Seder is the beginning of the night of the 15th of Nisan, as it begins following the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan. And then the next day, the 16th of Nisan, is the day after the annual Sabbath of Passover, the first day of Passover, and that's when the Jews begin counting the Omer. And so it is directly tied in with Passover, and the day that the Lord smote the firstborn of the Egyptians at midnight on the 15th of Nisan. And the very next day, the 16th of Nisan, is when they began counting the days as they began leaving Egypt. And so it ends up with the 50th day being Pentecost. And that's exactly 50 days then after Passover High Holy Day, because the 16th is day number 1 and Pentecost is day number 50. And so since Passover can occur on any date during the week, any weekday, the Omer count can begin on any day of the week, the day following the Passover High Holy Day. But not according to so many people, like the Karaite Jews, who were basically an unorthodox and heretical bunch that did not even originally, they follow the Sadducees of the Bible, and the Sadducees in the Bible were the ones who counted Pentecost from the weekly Sunday. They started that tradition, and they, according to the scriptures, do not believe in an afterlife. They don't believe in a resurrection. They don't believe in angels. And yet many of them were priests of the temple. Not all of them, but some of them were. The high and mighty highfalutin rich people in ancient Israel, and some of the temple priests were among the Sadducees. Well, that's a story in itself. But so today, this is the Sabbath that occurs, weekly Sabbath that occurs during the days of unleavened bread. So, according to the Karaites and the Sadducees and others, the Omer count begins tomorrow, Sunday. And that is a flagrant violation of the Scriptures and of the Word of God. The Omer count began the night or the day after Passover, Holy Day, or it began Tuesday night, and Wednesday was the first day of the Omer count. So this year, the Sadducees, the Karaites, and the churches that follow them are beginning the Omer count 5 days too late. There'll be 5 days off this year. Today's the 4th day of the true Omer count. Tonight and tomorrow, which is the first Sunday, would be the 5th day. So they're beginning 5 days late on the Omer count. So that means they're going to be celebrating Pentecost 5 days late, 5 days off. And of course, the way they got it figured out, since they begin the Omer count on a Sunday, and they count 7 weeks, which is 49 days, they end the Omer count on the day before Sunday, or a weekly Sabbath. And so the 50th day, Pentecost, always occurs on a Sunday, according to the churches today. And the Karaites. Well, you know, Sunday is the day of the sun god. Sunday is the day that the Catholics and all the Protestants worship Sunday on Sunday because they think it's the holy day. But God never enjoins Sunday itself to be a holy day anywhere in the Bible. It's simply the first day of the week. And the Sabbath is ordained to be the 7th day of the week, a day of rest that goes back to the time of creation. When God created the heavens and the earth, and then recreated the surface of the earth in 6 days, and then on the 7th day we read in Genesis chapter 2 verse 1, the Lord rested. He rested from all the work that he had made. And he sanctified the 7th day, the Sabbath day, and blessed it. And he intends that we enter into his rest from his labor and worship him, come together to worship him every Sabbath day as a day of rest. Today we carry out the service. We can no longer offer the Omer on Passover or the first fruits of Shavuot. Our only way of performing the service of God today is by taking to ourselves the yoke of the Torah and preparing ourselves for that, which was giving the Torah at Mount Sinai. We prepare for that by counting the Omer, in the same way as our forefathers prepared themselves when they had not yet entered the land of Israel. They were marching toward Sinai. And they were unable to bring the Omer offering because they were on the march every day. Their count, like ours, was toward the time when they would receive the Torah, they would receive the Beit HaMikdash, and then they could fulfill the entire commandment of offering the Omer. But we're like those coming out of Egypt, and we can't offer a literal Omer offering, but we can count the days of the Omer as we're commanded to do, as they were commanded to do. Okay, now I want to talk about that passage of Scripture which is read during this time, which is Joshua and the children of Israel keeping the first Passover after they entered the Promised Land. In Joshua chapter 5, actually in chapter 4, verse 19. It says, the people came up from the Jordan River on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal. So they're all at Gilgal in the Holy Land now. In chapter 5, verse 10 of Joshua, it says, the children of Israel camped at Gilgal and kept the Passover. On the 14th day of the month at twilight, that's in the evening, on the plains of Jericho. Now the 14th day they slew the Passover lambs, and at evening they ate the lambs and celebrated the Passover, as we read and studied and learned. The sacrifice was on the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan, and they roasted the lambs and ate them with unleavened bread. On the 15th day, beginning of the 15th day, they ate the Passover. Now verse 11 here says, and they ate of the produce of the land, that is the produce, the grain, the barley, on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain, roasted grain, on the very same day. What day was that? That was the 16th of Nisan, the day after the Passover holy day, which is the 15th of Nisan. Then on the very next day, the 16th of Nisan, they ate the produce of the land, the barley, the new barley crop. Now how could they do that? Because the 16th of Nisan was the wave sheaf offering. And they'd wave the wave sheaf before the Lord so the crop would be accepted, and then they could partake of it. So the 16th symbolized the wave sheaf offering, after which they could partake of the produce of the land, the new crop, the barley, out of which they made unleavened bread and parched grain, barley grain, because the barley is the first grain crop to be harvested in Palestine in the spring. And that's at Passover time. And then 50 days later, they begin the wheat harvest. So this was the barley harvest. And verse 12 says, and then the manna ceased on the day after they'd eaten the produce of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. Now this tells us then that they ate the new produce of the land and the barley and the grain on the 16th of Nisan, but they were not allowed to eat it until after the wave sheaf offering. As we read in Leviticus chapter 23, notice what God commanded. Verse 11, verse 10 of Leviticus 23, he says, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give to you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the firstfruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath the priest shall wave it. Well, the day after the Sabbath, it says. Verse 14 then says, you shall eat neither bread nor parched grain nor fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your God. That's the wave sheaf offering. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after that Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths or weeks shall be completed. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath or week. Then you shall offer a new grain offering to the Lord. So this begins on the Sabbath day of either an annual Sabbath or the weekly Sabbath. And after they offer this, they're able to partake of the crop. As verse 14 says, let me remind you, you shall eat neither bread nor parched grain nor fresh grain until the day you brought the offering to your God, the statute forever throughout your generations in your dwellings. Well, what we just read in Joshua chapter 5 now, let's just reread that again. See exactly what God says. He says, the children of Israel kept the Passover on the 14th day at twilight or in the evening. And they kept the feast on the 15th day. And then they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on that very same day. They can't do that until the wave sheaf offering. So the wave sheaf offering, the blessing had to be on the 16th of Nisan, the day after the Sabbath of the Passover. It's the Passover Sabbath. Those who say it was the weekly Sabbath can't explain that very well, because they have to fudge all the way around it and make chicken tracks all around the verse, like little chicken tracks. It says what it says. They ate the produce of the land and the grain the day after the Passover Sabbath. Literally, it says that Sabbath was the Passover. And the next day, they ate of the grain of the crops and the produce. Well, Passover is on the 15th of Nisan, so the next day is the 16th of Nisan. And that's the day you begin to count the Omer, 50 days or 49 days to the 50th day of Pentecost. Now, that may not be enough proof for some people. They want more. All right. Let's turn. I've got Keel and Delitzsch commentary on the Old Testament. Keel and Delitzsch. And on Leviticus chapter 23, talking about the Omer and the Passover, Leviticus 23, he says, the leading directions for the Passover and the Feast of Matzot are repeated from Exodus 12 and the verses there. And then it comes down to say, and the Lord spake, etc., when the Israelites had come into the land to be given them by the Lord, and it had reaped the harvest, they were to bring a sheaf of firstfruits of their harvest to the priest, that he might wave it before Jehovah on the day after the Sabbath, i.e., after the first day of Matzot. According to Josephus and Philo, it was a sheaf of barley. But this is not expressly commanded, because it would be taken for granted in Canaan, where the harvest began with the barley. In the warmer parts of Palestine, the barley ripens about the middle of April, and is reaped in April on the beginning of May, whereas the wheat ripens 2 or 3 weeks later. The priest was to wave the sheaf before Jehovah, i.e., to present it symbolically to God by the ceremony of waving without burning any of it upon the altar. Then he goes into the expression Mimerat HaShabbat, the morrow after the Sabbath, and what that signifies. He says that signifies the next day after the first day of the Feast of Matzot, i.e. the 16th of Abib, or Nisan, not the day of the Sabbath, which fell in the 7 days Feast of Matzot, not the weekly Sabbath, as the Bethusians supposed, still less the 22nd day of Nisan, or the day after the conclusion of the 7 days of the feast. Then in the footnote at the bottom of the page he says, the view advocated by the Bethusians, or the Sadducees, which has been lately supported by Schultz, is refuted not only by Joshua chapter 5, verse 11, but by the definite article used in this passage of Scripture, where it says, HaShabbat, the Sabbath, which points back to one of the feast days already mentioned, and still more decisively by the circumstance that according to verse 15, the 7 weeks, at the close of which the Feast of Pentecost was to be kept, were to be reckoned from this Sabbath. And if the Sabbath was not fixed, that is, the annual Sabbath, but might fall upon any day of the 7 days feast of Matzot, and therefore as much as 5 or 6 days after the Passover, the Feast of Passover itself would be forced out of the fundamental position which it occupies in the series of annual festivals. See, it is in the fundamental position being the first of the feast days. And it leads into the counting of the Omer, not just a weekly Sabbath day that's unanchored, but floating between any day during the feast. That would lessen the importance of the Passover Sabbath itself. So he says the Sabbath does not mean, in this case, the Sabbath does not mean the 7th day of the week in this passage, but the day of rest. Although the weekly Sabbath was always the 7th or last day of the week, hence not only was the 7th day of the week called the Sabbath in the Scriptures, but the Day of Atonement is called Sabbath, and Shabbaton, as a day of rest on which no laborious work was to be performed. The first day of the Feast of Matzot is called Sabbath, irrespective of the day of the week upon which it fell. The morrow after the Sabbath is equivalent to the morrow after the Passover, mentioned in Joshua 5, verse 11, where Passover signifies the day at the beginning of which the Passover meal was held, i.e. the first day of unleavened bread, which commenced on the evening of the 14th, in other words, the 15th of Abib. By offering the sheep for first fruits of the harvest, the Israelites were to consecrate their daily bread to the Lord their God, and practically to acknowledge that they owed the blessing of the harvest to the grace of God. They were not to eat any bread or roasted grains of the new corn till they had presented the offering of their God. This offering was fixed for the 2nd day of the Feast of Passover, that the connection between the harvest and the Passover might be kept in subordination to the leading idea of Passover itself. Then he says, verses 15 through 22 of Leviticus 23, the law for the special observance of the Feast of Harvest is added here without any fresh introductory formula to show at the very outset the close connection between the two feasts, Passover and Pentecost. 7 whole weeks, or 50 days, were to be reckoned from the day of the offering of the sheaf, and then the day of first fruits, or Feast of Weeks, was to be celebrated. That Shabbatot signifies weeks and not Sabbaths, he says, in Deuteronomy 16 verse 9, in Shabbat in the Gospels, Matthew 28 verse 1 in the Greek, is evident from the predicate timimot, which means complete. When you read the word complete there, 7 weeks shall be complete. And that doesn't mean 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. That makes no sense when you're talking about weeks or long periods of time. A Sabbath is a Sabbath, but 7 complete weeks makes sense. He says that the predicate complete, which would be quite unsuitable if Sabbath days were intended, as a long period might be reckoned by half weeks instead of whole, but certainly not by half Sabbath days. Consequently, the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, verse 16, is the day after the 7th week, not after the 7th Sabbath. So the King James and some translations are confusing to people. They think, well, it says Sabbath, so you got to count Sabbaths. No, you read the Tanakh, Moffat translation, and others, it says week. The word Shabbat in Hebrew can refer to or be interpreted as week. Shabbatot, weeks. In fact, in Leviticus chapter 16, it says, you shall count 7 Shavuot. And the word Shavuot literally means weeks. Never means Sabbaths, but weeks. And that's the same thing we're counting. 7 Shavuot equals 7 Sabbaths, which means the Sabbath in this case refers to weeks. And the day after the 7th week, not after the 7th Sabbath, on this day, that is 50 days after the first day of Matzot, Israel was to offer a new meal offering to the Lord, i.e. made of the fruit of the new harvest, the wheat harvest, wave loaves, on Pentecost. Well, that's enough from the commentary. Now, just a little more from the Rotherham Emphasized Bible. Talks about this word Sabbath or Shabbat and its meaning and definition. In the appendix, rest. See Sabbath. And so here we read in the Rotherham Bible, in the appendix, about the word Sabbath. People get so confused because, I don't know, either they're just lazy or ignorant, they don't want to study, and they just believe their ministers and take their word for it, and they don't study themselves because ministers can be wrong. I mean, how many churches today are right? How do you know your minister's right? People need to study and prove all things, Paul said. So here in the appendix he says a few critical words about the word Sabbath as it appears in the New Testament may be useful. First, this word sometimes appears as an appellative and sometimes as a proper name. that is, day of rest or Sabbath. Second, the term Sabbath is in several texts based in the plural in the Greek, for nevertheless it is evident that only one particular day is intended. And he gives a bunch of passages. In all these passages, the word in the original is in the plural, and yet it is plain that a particular individual day is intended. Nor is there anything surprising in this, he says. For the Hebrews at times used plural forms where other languages employ the singular. See Gesenius. Third, the word Sabbath is extended to signify week. The word Sabbath is extended to signify week. Even in this, there's nothing very far-fetched, since the translation from the idea of rest to that of a rest-bounded period of 7 days is a comparatively natural one. In Luke chapter 18, verse 12, the meaning of the Pharisee who said, "I fast twice in the week," notwithstanding that the word for week is here Sabbath, Sabbaton in the singular, since it would appear a very paltry boast to say, "I fast twice on the Sabbath." I mean, what? You fasted twice in one day? Well, how long were your fasts? I fasted all day today. I fasted 6 hours. Is that a fast? Of course not. That's a joke. But you say you fast twice in the week, 2 days in the week, well, that's significant. That takes a little effort and a little dedication. He says, anyone, if you boasted you fasted twice on the Sabbath, anyone with more pleasantry than Pharisaism might reply, well, I fast 3 times on the Sabbath. You know, big joke. To this example of Sabbaton in the singular used in the sense of week may now be added 1 Corinthians 16 verse 2. The word in the singular number, it would seem simply to ask the question, is it credible that the Apostle Paul here meant to enjoin on the assemblies of Galatia and of Corinth to lay by on the first hour of the Sabbath without so much as specifying that it was the first hour of the day that he intended? If not, and if the first day of the week, that is, but if not, the first day of the day is impossible. So what is left but to assume that he meant the first of the week, not the first day, first of the day, but first of the week. Week also proves itself in chapter 22, verse 7 in Acts. There's nothing unnatural in supposing the meaning to be week, for as we have seen, the word in the plural form may convey a singular idea. The word in the singular is twice used in the sense of week. Now let us test the 2 words, Sabbath and week. The scripture says, late in the Sabbath as it was on the point of dawning into the first of the Sabbaths. Does that stand up? Now try week. Late in the week as it was on the point of dawning into the first of the week. Here everything is harmonious. With the Hebrews, the Sabbath closed the week. Late on the Sabbath would be late in the week. And the transition is natural from the end of one week to the beginning of the next week. Hence the correct rendering here is week. Now that's New Testament. But the key to this is the word Shabbat. I had one minister was trying to argue against counting the Omer from the day after the Passover. And he said, well, it says Shabbat. And he opened the concordance and he Xeroxed the whole page of scriptures that talked about Shabbat. And he says, look at here. Shabbat means Sabbath day. Sabbath. So you got to count from the Sabbath. And count 7 Sabbaths. And that was his argument. Just open up Strong's Concordance, Xerox a page of the word Shabbat. He didn't go into any Bible dictionary, any concordance other than, the page of scriptures. He didn't go into any lexicons, but right now I have in front of me the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon. And we're looking at the word Shabbat. Now it says Shabbat. Okay. It says to rest from labor of land, to lie uncultivated, to cease, desist from doing anything, to cease, be interrupted, to cease to be, to have an end, to keep the Sabbath. It also means to cease, have an end, to make or let rest from labor of work, to intermit, to restrain, still, to cause to cease from doing anything, to make to cease, to interrupt, put an end to put away or remove. The basic definition of the word Shabbat is not a day, but an action. To stop doing something, to cease, to desist from labor, to be interrupted. So the point I'm making, brethren, is the weekly Shabbat gets its meaning from the definition of Shabbat, which means to cease working, to desist working, labor, to stop laboring, to interrupt your laboring, to restrain, hold back, bring to an end, laboring, or to rest. You stop working, you rest. The meaning is to rest, to cease, to be still, to rest, to cease from doing anything. That's the meaning of the word. And because the Sabbath day is a day of ceasing, it is a day of rest and stopping work, therefore the name became applied to the day as the name of the day. But the definition comes from the verb to rest from labor, or to cease or desist. That's the main meaning of the word. Now, in the beginning, in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, God tells us, chapter 2, verse 1, and the heavens and the earth were finished in all their host. And on the seventh day God completed his work which he had made. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because he rested from all his work on it, which God had created to make. And the word rested here in this passage is va-shabbat. Va-shabbat. And rested. And in the second place where we use the word rested, the Hebrew word is Shabbat. He rested, Shabbat. So you see, the word Shabbat basically means rested. And the Sabbath gets its name from the meaning of the word, not vice versa. And so any day of rest, including the annual holy days, are days of rest, of ceasing to work, or Shabbats. And the word means also, as we saw, weeks. And again, the proof of the Bible is, look at Joshua chapter 5, verses 11 and 12, where it says they stopped, the manna ceased on the day after the Passover. The day of the wave sheaf offering, the day they partook of the fruits and grains and produce of the land, on the day after the Passover. Not the day after the weekly Sabbath of that week, but the day after the Passover. They began to harvest and partake of the harvest. And they were forbidden to do that until the wave sheaf offering. So the wave sheaf offering has to be on the 16th of Nisan, and then they start counting 7 weeks. 7 periods ending by a cessation or a ceasing, and then starting another 7 days, ending with a cessation, ceasing, or stopping something. And we're going to cover that in just a minute. But before we do, I want to open up the Septuagint, because Jesus Christ and the disciples throughout the New Testament, they quoted the Septuagint in the New Testament. You can read that. Any Bible dictionary or commentary will say that most often the disciples quoted from the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, showing it had authority in the days of the disciples. Most Christians today kind of ignore the Septuagint, but we have the Septuagint available today. And in Leviticus chapter 23, in the Septuagint, it says, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evening times, is the Lord's Passover. And the first day shall be a holy convocation to you. You shall do no servile work. Verse 7. And the 7th day shall be a holy convocation to you, and you shall do no servile work. Speak to the children of Israel, verse 10, and you shall say to them, when you enter the land which I give you, that is the promised land, and reap the harvest of it, then shall you bring a sheaf, the first fruits of your harvest, to the priest. And he shall lift up the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow of the first day, the priest shall lift it up. Well, what is the first day talking about? And the first day of the feast, of the first day, shall be a holy convocation to you. It's talking about the Passover. The first day shall be a holy convocation. It labels that the first day, which is Nisan 15. Then, in verse 11, it says, on the morrow of the first day, that is Nisan 15, the next morrow or morning, Nisan 16, the priest shall lift it up. So here again, it was clearly Nisan 16, not a weekly Sabbath day. And verse 15 says, and you shall number to yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day on which you offer the sheaf of the heave offering, 7 full weeks, until the morrow after the last week. You shall number 50 days, and then bring a new meat offering to the Lord, 2 loaves, which was Pentecost. So we are counting the Omer correctly. Those who count differently are in grave error. We are now on the 4th day of the Omer count. Now, according to the counting of the Omer, there's a spiritual lesson that we learn every year as we do this. Because each week of the Omer count describes one of the 7 attributes of God upon which the world is based. And the Jews understand this, that these 7 attributes were attributes of our ancestors, the patriarchs, the 7 shepherds. There was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David. 7 great men of God. Each of them was famous for a particular attribute. Abraham was famous for his loving kindness. Isaac was famous for his strength and strong will, self-control. Jacob was famous for his peacefulness, harmony, and completeness. Moses was famous for his humility, his strength, victory, perseverance, and leadership. Aaron was famous for his splendor, majesty, and peace. Joseph was famous for his faith and his obedience to Torah as a foundation. And David was famous for his kingship, rulership, sovereignty, majesty. Now in the Hebrew, Abraham was Chesed, loving kindness. Isaac was Gevurah, containing strength. Jacob was Teferet, harmony, peace, beauty. Moses was Netzach, power, triumph, victory. Aaron was Hod, glory, majesty. Joseph was Yesod, foundation. And David was Malkut, kingship. Today is the day of Netzach, pictured by Moses. It's the week of Abraham, the week of Chesed, or loving kindness. So this whole week we're to be working on the characteristic of loving kindness. And this particular day we're to be concentrating on the victory and overcoming and endurance and persistence of loving kindness. And we're to inculcate all these attributes in our character as we work and strive, working forward to the day of Pentecost, or Shavuot, or divine revelation, which pictures the coming of the kingdom of God. So we have a lot to do, brethren. We need to be counting this Omer every day. We need to be counting it and working on our character, perfecting ourselves with God's help through the Holy Spirit. So read the articles on the website on counting the Omer and take advantage of this opportunity in this mitzvot which God commanded when he said, "And you shall count for yourselves these 7 weeks of 7 days each, or 49 days, leading up to Pentecost." Praise God for his truth and his mercy and his goodness, and may we endure to the end, Netzach, in loving kindness.